Hi, everyone, and welcome to the I Am Landscape Growth Podcast, where entrepreneurs help entrepreneurs grow faster, better, and stronger in the green industry. From leadership to sales to recruiting and operational excellence, we cover the topics holding entrepreneurs back and share how to get past those bottlenecks with the best in the industry. I'm your host, Rob Murray, co founder and CEO of Intrigue, a digital marketing company focused on helping landscape companies grow. So sit back and enjoy the show. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the I Am Landscape Growth Podcast. Today, I have the honor of introducing Scot Tolson from Lawn and Landscape Solutions. Scot, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rob.
Scot is also on the board of directors for the Magic Council, which is the Mid America Green Industry Council. So we get a really cool perspective from not only an association perspective, but also from somebody that's got boots on the ground. So yeah, thanks again, Scot, for doing this. I was checking you out. I have your LinkedIn profile up right now. And one of the things I love about what we're going to do in today's, kind of show is you kind of have it nailed in your LinkedIn profile. Trust the people and inspire everyone with big exclamation point. So I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of value out of listening to that whole approach. So before we do that, though, and to give everybody a bit of context in terms of where you're coming from and where you are today, so that when they're listening, they have an idea of the perspective it's coming from. Can you give us a bit of like a Cole's Notes version of your ramp up to where you are right now in the green industry and kind of what you've been up to get there?
Sure. Yeah, I started in the industry very, very young. So I've had a lot of background in it. I started around 2 years old. My uncle was a landscape designer. All of my family has been in the ag industry for my entire life. Grandparents farmers, great grandparents farmers. I'm the fourth generation ag student graduate from Kansas State University. So I've had a lot of background. We put a lot of landscapes in when I was little, helping my family, helped my mom and dad, my grandparents had extensive gardens and stuff like that. So my background in agriculture and horticulture together is very extensive. So I actually didn't find the industry professionally until I was about 26 years old. I ended up graduating with the ag degree, but I thought I was going a completely different direction in sports turf and found landscape in that whole situation. So I started in a commercial company when I was 26 after I graduated as a turf manager and have kind of worked my way up into understanding leadership and worked into leadership roles. So, turf manager, division manager, operations manager, branch manager, and now as a general manager. So, that's kind of the gist of where I come from and where I've been.
Awesome. And just in terms of like some of the specifics around the business, so being in lawn and landscape solutions right now, what is the core focus of the business, just so people have a bit of context around where you are there?
So we're primarily a residential business. We're about 95% residential, 5% commercial. We are 60% design and build. And our mantra is design, build, maintain. So we're about 40% maintenance enhancement. And we're really driving our maintenance business through our design and build division.
Okay, sweet. So we're going to touch on that in a quick second, but I want to come back and circle back towards this idea that you said you kind of started learning leadership and studying leadership. I think it's a good of a fascinating topic because it's pretty nebulous. Like leadership means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and everybody's got a definition. It's kind of like strategy. No one really knows what it is. Everybody knows what it is, but everybody's got a different answer.
Yes.
So can you just kind of give us a bit of an idea from your take on like what does studying leadership actually mean? Like how do you start that process? Like how did you get into it?
Really, it started pretty when I was pretty young. I was a Boy Scout. I grew up that way. Started when I was a Cub Scout, and I've always loved the leadership roles. I was a patrol leader. I was a senior patrol leader. I was all the things in Boy Scouts leadership you could possibly be. That grew into sports as well. And you can, it's kind of always been a thing where you can be a leader without being the manager as well. But as a high school wrestler, and being a captain of the team and things like that. So I've always kind of been involved in some sort of leadership role. I've always looked at leadership to me as helping everyone else before I help myself. I always obviously wanted to win in high school sports and in junior high sports, but always got more joy out of other people winning. And I didn't really know what that meant until later on in life when I started getting into more roles that weren't individuals like turf management. Just when I was put into my first management role as leading a mowing division, I really started to realize what that meant, and then got really into it. And reading and started reading a lot of landscape management articles and things like that. I started reading books pretty heavily in the last 2 years, but that wasn't really a thing for me until then. So I've always been really intrigued by leadership, but didn't know what that really meant really until the last 2 to 3 years.
Very cool. And is there a resource or two that you might point people towards that you've kind of found kind of hit the nail on the head?
I mean, the two books that have influenced me the most over the last 3 years are both by Simon Sinek. Huge fan of that guy. It is Start with Why and The Infinite Game, and
Beautiful.
that it just encompasses everything about what we're talking about. The leaders building leaders, which I did not coin that phrase. That actually comes from Thane Isaacs. He leads Innovations Tomorrow. You can find him on LinkedIn as well. Great guy. We hooked up a couple years back and met on a podcast just like this, and he kind of turned me on to leaders building leaders, and that's kind of how I've led my life over the last couple of years.
Very cool. Well, and one of the things you said too earlier that kind of struck a chord and is very much in line with Simon Sinek stuff, right? Like, making sure everybody else is winning, making sure everybody else is going to, improving and doing well. And then there's that leaders eat last kind of concept. I don't know if you had a chance to read that one too, but it's
I
super.
have.
Yeah, it's awesome. So the infinite game and start with why. So, um, there's a lot we can actually we'll dig in on the start with why, and I think why it's so valuable for folks to understand engaging people emotionally. John C. Maxwell's got a good one. Have you heard the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership?
Have not read it, but I know who John Maxwell pretty well.
Yeah, it's a solid read, and one of the concepts is you got to win a heart before you can ask for a hand, and I just think that kind of embodies kind of what you're saying. So that's cool. Um,
Absolutely.
so I mean, sticking on this leadership thing, then leaders building leaders, something that you gravitated to. Um, you know, when we ask people growth constraints, like the whole point of this podcast is to help identify, what are people seeing as the growth constraints within the industry, and what are entrepreneurs, folks like you, leaders in the industry, doing to break through those constraints. We hear it time and time again. Number one out of the top three is staff. Whether it's getting staff or keeping staff, there's nobody out there to hire, or everybody will jump ship for a dollar. Like, and I'm polarizing because not everybody believes this, but that is what we're hearing. What's your take on the biggest growth constraint right now in the industry?
It's about the same. It's the same for everybody. It's staffing. It's staffing. It's recruitment. It's retention, and it's really retention. You can if you can keep your people in place and give them forward movement, opportunity, growth, all the things that people want. That's where it all starts, and then you have a better chance of acquiring better people as well. So it is staffing. That'd be the number one thing.
Cool. And so with lawn and landscape solutions, um, I mean, if, I know you're focusing on the whole way through, whether it's recruiting, training, coaching, mentorship, retention. Um, but if you were to look at that life cycle of somebody coming on the team, are you putting more focus up front to get new people, or are you putting more focus, growing folks, or retaining folks? Like if you had to break it up into three kind of spots.
In my role, I put more on coaching. That's where I spend a lot of my time because we're talking about leaders building leaders. As a general manager, I oversee our leadership team, which are controller, our a CFO basically, our operations manager, our sales manager, and everything goes downhill. So if I'm coaching my staff, my leaders, then they're building leaders underneath them, and that's really what we're working on right now. Is the front line, is the leadership team to the front line leaders. So it's really the coaching and the growth in everyone from that top leadership role down. So that way we have the infrastructure and the people to continue to build our retention, continue to build our growth.
Cool. And so for people that maybe are doing some coaching but don't necessarily have a formal approach, maybe some people have heard of doing coaching but haven't actually started doing it. What are some of the things that you do when you're coaching your leaders on not only them but also coaching them to coach others? Is there a formal process? Is it a bit more like, hey, we've got this amount of time set aside, we're going to talk about these things? Like, how do you go about doing that?
Well, number one thing is you keep your coaching sessions very constant, weekly, biweekly, whatever you're doing. You don't give up that time to anybody else. You give it up to only that person. So that way you're focusing on that person. Uh, Followed down structure wise, it just depends on the person. It depends on what you're doing. I have different structures that I'll follow for different people. Some people need different things. Some people understand coaching. Some people don't know exactly what coaching is. They understand what management is, but you manage numbers, you lead people. So if you follow that, it's you have to kind of determine where people are at in their leadership careers and coach them based on what they need. And that's kind of where I facilitate and where I put my effort into everyone.
Yeah,
But
okay, cool.
people first.
And so when you're talking about people first and, taking this approach where you can understand someone where they are in their career and where they are in their lives and then coach them kind of from there, what are some tips that you'd give leaders that are listening to this that want to start coaching but haven't really gotten into it too much yet? And they're like, well, I don't like, what am I supposed to say when I'm in these meetings? Like, let's say we set up this meeting that's weekly, Thursdays, every Thursday, 9 a.m., 10 a.m., whatever it might be. Okay, I'm going to go sit down and I'm like, I got nothing. So, like, what are we saying in these sessions?
Well, one, there's always an agenda. You have to kind of formalize it to what they need, and there's always agenda. You stick the same agenda. The number two is listen, and that's probably the most important thing is that listening to who you're working with. It's not always about me talking. I can talk till I'm blue in the face, and sometimes it doesn't do any good. But you're listening. You're giving feedback based on what you're hearing from them. What's their concerns? How are you addressing their concerns? Their issues in the field. Coaching is more about listening than it is talking sometimes. So that's really what it is, and to me.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, one of the things we will ask a lot is anything in your way right now? Is there friction inside the company? Is there customers, team members, processes, systems, lack thereof that are making it difficult for you to do your job? And kind of looking at like my job as an opportunity to like clear the path so that people can move quickly and do things well without having to like, you know, be frustrated or like, why don't we have this thing or whatever?
Right.
Is anything in your way? We find is a decent question for that.
Yeah,
Is there any
absolutely.
is there any question that you have as a go-to that you kind of ask folks when you're kind of kicking things off?
How are you doing? That's number one. How are you doing as a person? How are you doing as an employee? That's the number one. Number two, what do you feel good about? That's usually what we start with is what do you feel good about, and then we kind of go from there. But those are the three main ones you talk about. Then where are you needing help right now? What what resources do you need to be successful in life? Be successful in your job? And sometimes they vary from week to week. It may not always be the same. I mean, I meet weekly with all of my leadership team individually and as a group as well. And we talk about just those things. We mainly talk about people. We don't talk about numbers so much in the one-on-one. And that's where we talk about the numbers in the leadership meetings with our scorecard. We follow EOS system. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one,
Very much so.
entrepreneurial operating system. And we're new into that, about 6 months. So we follow that, and then that kind of trickles down from top down. But the one-on-ones is just purely based on coaching about people and
Okay.
building people outside it, not as well as just inside the business. So
And so then, so you hear some folks being like, hey, I don't need to hear about your personal lives. You're at work right now. Check it at the door. Like this older school mentality of like, hey, actually, I think there's a show on Apple TV. What's it called? Like Convergence or something like that, where they get actually programmed so that when they walk in their office, they forget themselves as a human being. And when they leave the office, they forget their office work. So we know that we're kind of past that, or at least I believe a lot of people know we're past those days. What do you say to people that are like having a hard time bringing personal issues in with the business especially in a coaching environment, when you're asking somebody how they're doing, they're going to be prone to talk about like, yeah, you know what, it's tough, like I got twins under the age of 1 right now. I'm not sleeping really well, and life's kind of tough at home. That pops up, right?
oh yeah, absolutely. Now, I mean, the number one thing is care. You got to care about your people, and that's kind of what my whole year has been driven about. Is 2023 is about caring. You got to care about the people that work with you, and when they're struggling outside of work, obviously they're going to struggle in work, and it's not work related whatsoever. It's not a issue within their what they're doing at work. It's purely outside. So you have to be able to help them and listen to what their needs are right now. And it's difficult because it's not about work, and it's fun to help them in what they need outside of work as well. We set goal. Like one of the things we just have done is we set goals, 3 work goals and 3 personal goals, and we've shared them with the whole team. and that way we hold ourselves accountable. But 3 personal goals, the reason I do that is because they're if you're helping each other outside of work, your trust in everyone inside of work is going to be way better.
Way better. Yeah, we have a resource. I'll make sure I send it to you after this called Roadmaps. Very similar to what you just said, and I'll put it in the link when we put this up, the show up on iTunes and Spotify.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, to your point, if I understand what you want to accomplish, and you know what I want to accomplish, and we see it out in the world, we might be able to like, hey, support each other in making that happen. Or I might know
Hmm.
somebody that might be able to help you. That kind of thing. That's super cool.
Absolutely.
So then, okay, coaching to help people grow, to coach people through some difficult times, using questions like, "How are you doing as a person? How are you doing as an employee? What do you feel good about?" Like these are all really good tips, and I think it's really undervalued in terms of some organizational settings where they're not having these weekly like kind of opportunities for coaching. Now, if we flip it a little bit though and talk about like someone's having a hard time, meaning they're not doing a good job, we're putting time into them, but they're not able to get there when we're talking about like we might have to leave, we have to separate and go different ways. Do you have some approaches that you can share with people? Because I think that idea about caring about people is also about like being humanistic in, if we have to end up going separate ways and we have to let someone go, it still need to be done with care and compassion. And so
Mhm.
do you have any tips or stories that you might be able to share, like how someone might approach something like that?
The part of the one-on-ones is kind of the accountability factor as well. It's not that you want to hold people accountable. You want to trust that they're doing their what they're supposed to do. And when they don't, a lot of times when you're meeting one-on-one, they already know. And that's the best part of the sharing the numbers as a scoreboard in the leadership meetings and on down, the operations meetings, they all have the same type of meetings, is everybody already knows pretty much where they're at accountability wise. And so they're usually asking you prior to you having to go to them about the issues. It's pretty open book. It's visibility on the entire employee, all the employees at the same time for most part. So when you're having a discussion with them, it's not as hard because you've already had that. They've already been aware of it or have already come to you in most cases. So if it comes to the end result of separation, you always want to put everything you can into everybody before you have to do that. But it does come down to it. Sometimes you got to cut ties and go a different direction. Now, if you've had enough good conversations, quality conversations with them, is there an issue of capacity of the job and they're just in the wrong seat? Or is it, they're just not a good person or not a good fit for the values? And a lot of times they're not a good, it's not that they're not a good fit for the values because they've been there. You've hired them. They've been in the right place. They've been in the place for the right amount of time. They just not have the capacity to handle what they're doing. So it may be just a move of seat, a
Yeah.
different seat in the company. So you never want to think about it as cutting ties because you want to put everything you can into your people, and that's kind of how I follow there. It's just let's find a different seat, and if there's not a seat, okay. I mean, here's where we have.
Yeah. And so, I mean, a lot of times we'll hear people feel like they're blindsided if they get let go or something like that. And I mean, having this kind of one-on-one accountability and visibility, I think really helps, create that. Cause I feel like if somebody isn't doing a good job, they're usually pretty stressed out about it too. Like
Yes.
if they know, it's a lot easier to manage. So I really, appreciate that perspective. So then going back to this original idea of leaders building leaders then. So you've got this idea and this framework for building coaching with your leadership team, and now you're working on getting them to coach, the frontline staff, whether it's supervisors or people out in the field, whatever it might be. So what kind of approaches do you take to get them going on, the idea of literally doing what you're doing, which is, building leaders to lead leaders? Like how do you focus on that?
Yeah, our number one job is to be able to train our replacement, right? Or we're never able to move up. We're never able to move out if we eventually want to retire and we want to continue with our infinite mindset, as Simon Sinek would say. It's an infinite game, and the game continues without us forever. So it's just a repetitious thing where you just keep doing the same thing. You have to have the correct onboarding. How are we onboarding? And this is always something we're working on, and we're getting better at is onboarding when you do recruit after you recruit you're onboarding. How are you onboarding? What does our onboarding look like? Our onboarding process is throw them in a truck and good luck,
Yeah.
or are we spending time with them, going over the most commonly asked questions of the industry? There's three: where's the bathroom, when's payday, and where do I park? That's the three most commonly asked questions in landscape. and then go over what is our values. What is our, obviously you went through the interview process, you've heard about our values. We feel you meet the values, you feel you meet the values. And what's our mission, what's our vision, where are we going, what's our long-term scheme, what's our 1 year, what's our 3 year, what's our 5 year. And we're sitting down with different business portion owners, like the operations manager, leadership team owners, and going, okay, this is their portion. And we have our visionary, which is our owner, and he lays out the vision. And we try and get that done more and more and more as we go on. We always hear we don't have time, but we don't have time not to. So it starts
Okay,
with onboarding, and then
but
it, and then it
tell me
moves
about
to
that. We don't have time not to, because there's so many people that say they don't have the time to do that. So we
no,
don't have
nobody
time
has any
not to.
time.
Right, of
Nobody has
course.
any time. So the thing is, like, if you invest into people and you say your people first, you always have time. Your time is just moved. Your time now is to sit there with that person and onboard them correctly. And it's 3 or 4 different people's jobs to do that throughout that day. But if you don't do that time, where's that person going to be in 2 weeks or tomorrow, really? So if nobody has time, but everybody should have time. So your
Not to
time just
mention the impression that can be created the first day, right? Like that whole halo effect that can work
yes.
for you or against you in day one. I think that's a really valuable piece, man. So, okay, coming away from the leadership piece for a minute and going back to what you were saying with regard to this mantra: design, build, maintain. We work with a bunch of landscapers, and they do design, build. We don't do maintenance.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of people that do maintenance. They're like, yeah, we don't really do design, build. Um, and then you're talking design, build, and maintain. This
Mm-hmm.
is something that we're really trying to get people to understand the value of. Like, you have a really good customer because you just, did a whatever $280,000 project or $150,000 landscape construction project, and now you're going to let it grow over, and someone else is going to maintain it. So, like, where does it come from for you folks around this design, build, maintain mantra? What is that all about?
So it's actually always been in our logo. That's the crazy thing. It's about in 2013 when I joined Lawn and Landscape Solutions, we had it in our logo. It says design, build, maintain. And about 2 years after that, we started working with Jeffrey Scott, an industry consultant, pretty heavily. Owner's very involved with him now, and it was, where are we going? What are we doing? And I was like, well, it's right in our logo. We talked about it. It's right in our logo. It says design, build, maintain. We're doing a great job designing and building, but what are we doing with the maintenance? We were a smaller maintenance company then than we are now, but it's, what does the customer experience look like going from design to build to maintain? And we've really narrowed that down here in the last 6 months as to what that process looks like, and to be able to maintain that property afterwards. Be surprised how many people in our industry, or in any industry for that matter, is, oh, I didn't know you did that.
Right.
But so many times, I didn't know you did that. Well, it's literally in our logo. Well, don't assume people are reading your logo.
No.
Don't assume people understand that you're doing what you're doing. It's design, build, maintain. So, hey, we have our design team, we have our sales team, and we have our maintenance team. And there is actually a process that goes through that whole structure of how we sell it, we design it, we sell it, and then the handoff when the walkthrough is done with the account manager. We have an account manager come in and actually meet with them to sell them ongoing maintenance and provide ongoing maintenance. They're going to spend it anyway with somebody, so why
Yeah.
not spend it with us?
Right. And so then what does that look like in terms of that process? So, like, you've got somebody who comes in and does a walkthrough, they're stoked, right? Because now the project is, quasi finished, and they're just looking at this epic thing that has just been built from whatever it was before. Is there a couple of key steps around like that approach and that like service approach? Some people we hear, they don't want to be pushy or salesy, so it's like they're like, oh, I don't necessarily want to push this on people, even though they don't have a clue that they do it. So can you just kind of give us an insight in like how you folks walk through that process?
We don't see as being pushy. We see as adding value. We've already installed all the work. We understand what it takes. We know what it looks like to take care of it for the rest of the
Better than
longevity.
anybody could possibly.
That's right. Right. Exactly. So we have certain positions within the company, and we have a project manager who pretty much after it's sold, and there's a handoff between the salesperson, the project manager, and the production manager. They do a walkthrough of the property. We build the project. The project manager actually sees it all the way through, and then they work with the homeowner at the end to do the walkthrough, the punch list, everything. And that's when the account manager is also present they do the walkthrough as well. They already have a proposal, and then, okay, let's talk about what it takes to maintain everything now. And usually they're using somebody to do some of that stuff, but oh, okay, let me take a look at it, and then it usually moves on from there. We've had a pretty successful conversion rate this year with the process the way it is. So
Yeah. Okay.
it's
So
working
what would
pretty
what
well.
would that look like for someone listening that's been, either putting it off or they've, haven't really thought about it. Now they're thinking they want to. What does it look like out of 10 projects built, constructed? How many of them are turning into maintenance clients when doing it the way you're doing it?
Right. We build a lot of bigger projects right now, so it's hard to say how many projects. And out of the last 10, we probably have a 50% conversion rate at this
Yeah, like
point.
that's huge.
I'd like to see it about 80 or 90, but that's the general manager talking. So
Yeah, yeah, good on you. But still, like, and then what's the average value of a project the last 10 for you folks, like in terms of size, from a dollar perspective?
oh, last 10, we have some really high ones, and we have some, obviously we do a lot of work in between, anywhere between 5,000 and 200, 300,000. So I average probably about 80,
Yeah, okay, great.
80,000.
$80,000 average, and then you look at, an average annual maintenance value. What would you put that at ish?
I think our average is between about 4,500 and 10,000. Just depends on the size.
So call it
Because we do
seven
everything
grand.
from turf applications only, all the way up to full service. But our full service clients are usually about 7,000 to 10,000.
Yeah, okay, cool. I'm just saying, like, you get essentially 10 clients onto maintenance. You essentially have a new project design that's baked into your business every year, forever, as long as you don't mess it up, right?
Correct.
Not to
Correct.
mention the recurring revenue model and what it does for the sales value of the business, and. So I just think that's really cool, Scott. I really appreciate you sharing that. All right, so as part, like a board of director, and you've been part of the Mid America Green Industry Council for quite some time. Um, can you just give us a quick kind of overview of what it's all about, and then the value afterwards of like being involved with it?
Sure.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah. So the Mid America Industry Council, Green Industry Council, is based in Kansas City. We serve mainly the Kansas City metro area, but it goes a little bit further than that. It depends on what the current offering. We do a lot of continuing education. We support the industry as a whole in our area for the H2B program, things like that. We'll bring in speakers, and we don't work with lobbyists or any of that stuff. There's a whole other group that does that, but we definitely support the industry as a whole in that aspect. So a lot of the education, advocation that we do, and then that we ultimately cultivation is what we do. So that's kind of along those lines that we're redoing some of our rebranding and stuff, and it's our three pillars: cultivate, educate, and advocate. And that's kind of what we're going for, and that's what we've been doing for years and years.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And so then, being involved yourself, like one of the things we find a lot are folks that are, so there's like, to oversimplify, people that aren't involved in industry associations, people that are, and people that lead within them. And we find that, the more involved people get in these things, usually the more successful they are with their business outside of the association. Coincidence? I think not. So, in terms of your experience involved with the association and being on, say, a board of directors, like what's that been like for your leadership journey and just understanding the business better and being around these folks? Like, what's that done for you personally?
Well, the initial reason why I got on the board, other than, I mean, I had some friends on it, and that's always a good thing to be a part of something bigger than yourself. Is I want to make the industry better. Like my whole goal is to kind of along with the infinite game is I don't want to just leave what I have behind. I want to leave the legacy behind, not for myself, but for the industry. Our industry could be so much better than it is, and that is why I'm a part of it. I want to help raise our industry efforts. I want to help raise our industry education level. I want to help raise our industry, just the way we are viewed as a whole, for the whole city, obviously, but for the whole country as well. I think we do sometimes do a pretty poor job of letting people know how good we actually are and what we
Mhm.
actually stand for. And that's why I'm there, and that's what my experience has been, and that's why I continue to do it.
That's very cool, man. Like it was interesting. I was talking to a guy actually out of New Brunswick in Canada, and he's been a director of landscape New Brunswick for quite some time. And he talked about the idea that, landscaping and the green industry is really the only true green industry.
Hmm.
He goes and does a bunch of engagement talks with kids in high schools, that kind of stuff, and he says, is riding an electric car to work or to school green? And they a lot of people put their hand up. And he's like, well, it's not green, it's less gray. Is riding your bike to school, is that green? They're like, yes, I'll put their hands up. He's like, well, it's not actually green, it's actually less gray. Planting is green, like shaping landscapes and making things healthier, whether it be, waterways or retaining walls for escarpments, whatever, like there is legit green in the industry. I think you're right. That isn't necessarily positioned the best, especially for a generation of folks coming up right now, young workers who want to be part of something like sustainable, environmental, and has
Mhm.
impact. So, then in terms of the Magic Council and your participation, so how has it given you that opportunity to do that? Like, have you had a chance to learn and grow while being a part of it? Because you've been in it for how many years now?
I think around 5 or 6 now, I believe. I don't know the exact date I
Sure,
started.
but
It's
it's
been a little
okay.
while.
A
It's been
better
exciting.
better
So
part of a decade anyway.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
And so what
I've been involved. I've been involved with it since pretty almost the beginning of my commercial experience in 2006. So in some form or fashion, just have been on the board for about 5 years.
Very cool. And so then what's it been like then for you to be able to, surround yourself with those people, and what's it been in terms of the value that it's brought to you
I mean,
personally?
for professionalism, it's great. For me individually, it's been awesome. You get to be around a group of professionals who love the industry as much as I do, who care about it as much as I do, who care about the people who are involved in it and raising the bar for everyone around. So it's been awesome for me. It's helped my professional career immensely. I mean, I've got to help with our conference every year. I'm the conference chair. And that's where we provide the speakers and the facility for our recertification for chemical applicators.
Yeah,
And that's one of our biggest programs that we have year to year, just because we have to keep everybody on the up and up for certifications,
right.
companies as well as people. So that's usually a 2 day event.
And when is it this year?
It's, I think, the third week of December, right before Christmas this year. And we just moved to one day, but we cover Kansas, Missouri. We have a lot to do since we're on the state line.
Yeah,
But it's been a fun experience, and Jane Mail, our director, has been fantastic. So just want to give her a shout out as well.
sweet. Well, thank you, Jane. um, okay, so then you mentioned something in passing there a while ago, and you referenced it a couple of times. Whether it's using core values, whether it's vision, or it's picture of 5 years, 3 years, 1 year, and this whole EOS framework, the entrepreneurial operating system. When did you guys start using that? What's the impact been for the business leveraging a system like that?
So we started that in January, right when I started back with Lawn and Landscape Solutions. The owner and I actually read the book about this traction about the same time, and then we read Rocket Fuel, which is a visionary integrator relationship, and right before I started. So it's been great. It keeps you on track. It puts everything into perspective and has the measurables that you can put a business in line with, and it works for any business, not just landscape.
No, of
So
course.
it's been great for us. I mean, we're still new to it, 6 months in, 7 months in, so we're still a little clunky, but we're working out kinks and we're really moving forward. It's been big help for moving the business forward and to know where we're at and where we're going.
Very cool. And in terms of the organization, does everybody have an idea of what's going on within EOS? And like, there's a vision traction organizer that as an organization you fill out and share with everybody. Is it almost there? 6 months isn't a long time, right? So, and that's a lot of work to get done.
It is, and I will say that's our biggest goal for the fourth quarter, end of third and fourth quarter, is to really share that vision. We kind of came together here in about a month ago and said we did a great job in the leadership team, but we have not done a great job sharing it with the rest of the team. So we all have faults, and that's been ours this year, and we're really working on that one going forward for the fourth quarter to make sure it shares some top down.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, consciousness is the first step to change, right? So, I mean,
Uh-huh.
as long as we know we didn't do it. So, okay. So, you mentioned that growing up, the leadership's always been kind of emergent leader in everything that you've done, and then you've brought it to where you are professionally, and this idea of care being the theme of this year for you. Like, do you have a theme every year, and what made this year's care or this year's theme care?
Not really. Like I said, about 2 years ago, I got really into reading, and I read a book by John Gordon. I'm familiar with John Gordon, The
Yes.
One Word, I believe, and it kind of said put a word out there for the year annually and live that word every day. If you wake up and it's not driven by the word, you're probably doing something wrong. It's pretty easy to do if you just wake up. I'm going to care about what I do for myself. I'm going to care about my people today. I'm going to care about my family. I'm going to care about everything that goes on around you. So it's been easy for that for me for this year.
Very cool.
But that's where it came from.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I appreciate sharing it because it's so simple, right? And I find things that are that simple take a lot of time to get to. I think what was that the saying? Sorry, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you this long one. And when we simplify things, I think things become so much easier to manage and to work through. So I just really, sharing that's really good. All right. So if there was one thing, then if you were to tell a leader who's like, you know what, I'm going to step up, I'm going to start leading, I'm going to start coaching, I'm going to start serving my people. What's the one thing that you wish you had learned, maybe say 5 or 10 years ago, that you know today, that you wish you had known then, that you'd want to tell someone else?
No matter what you do on a day-to-day basis, always make time for your team. Always make time for someone on your team if they need that time right then. There's something that can be done with a computer later on. I know it adds time to the day, but always take time to listen, I guess.
Very cool, man. Yeah, what did they say? 2 years, one mouth use according.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is awesome. This is jam packed too, right? Like, I mean, everything from the idea of leaders building leaders, EOS, coaching, and the little nuances to it, design, build, maintain, and the whole business model around making a profitable landscape business. Like, why would we let someone else maintain the project that we know better than anybody in the world? I really appreciate you doing this, Scott. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Rob. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode of I Am Landscape Growth Podcast. The I Am Landscape Growth Podcast is brought to you by Intrigue, where passionate marketing meets predictable results for entrepreneurs. Remember to like and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss the next episode. And if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, please visit intriguemedia.com and click on podcasts.